She calls me on the phone, says we have the results. It's very rare disease. I've never come across it in my 35 years as an epidemiologist. I can tell there's 20 other cases in the world. His life will tell us more about this condition than I could ever. Let's talk on Monday. And I was like, okay. Really? Like, I mean, every child, every person deserves to be celebrated. Not deserves. Every person should be celebrated. And in many circumstances, when you have like your own daughters and like mine, when you have a diagnosis of difference, that's not the case, and it becomes really hard to celebrate them. Like, it wasn't because I couldn't have handled it. It was because there was a complete lack of support. There was a complete lack of emotional intelligence around being a parent and raising a child, and all the things that go along with that aren't just about a diagnosis or aren't just about what you can and can't do in society. And that was the hard part, the isolation, the loneliness. Yeah.
Welcome to the Veerkrachtige Vrouwen podcast. This episode is in English because I'm talking to an American woman. Her name is Sarah Lapham. She is a sexual rights advocate for women. She's also a mother of a very special son, and she has a unique perspective on life and on medical conditions and how to deal with them. She is the founder and director of the foundation A Different Story, and we're going to talk about her life in general as an activist and how she's dealing with the condition of her son. He has a very rare medical condition. There are only about 80 people worldwide who are suffering from TRPM12. Well, we're going to talk about all of this and also about her strength and resilience. So please don't forget to like and share my video so my channel can grow and I can inspire and reach much more people. Welcome, Sarah.
Hello. Thank you.
Thank you for accepting my invitation to be a guest in my podcast.
Happy to be here.
Great. We are doing this in English because you are an American and your Dutch is not quite up to par when we can talk in Dutch.
It's niet perfect. Ik kan wel Nederlands praten, maar niet nu. Niet for this sort of conversation.
I understand, no problem. But if I can't find a word, if I say it in Dutch, you will understand me.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, great. Okay, Sarah, you have had quite an impressive career up to now. I looked at your resume, and you are a lobbyist and a sexual rights for women, an advocate for sexual rights for women. And you were also an international communications advisor for the Rutgers Stichting here in the Netherlands. And you have lived in several countries. You were born in the US, you lived in London, in Brussels, and now you are in Amsterdam. Are you here? Did you end up here also because of your work, or is there another reason?
Initially, yes, I came here for work. The Netherlands has a fantastic record in fighting for sexual reproductive rights and health. So yeah, that was an interest, and also quality of life.
And where exactly does that come from, your activism for women's rights?
Well, I was raised in a really small town in Texas. And long story short, the first time I ever had sex, I was very unlucky and got pregnant. and had to have an underground abortion in Texas. I had not had any sexual education at that point, and was a real product of my own environment of ignorance and women and young girls not really understanding the power of their bodies. Um, so that kind of started my journey and going into lobbying as a career, and focusing then a little bit later in my career on sexual reproductive rights and health.
Yeah. How old were you when you got pregnant?
I was 17.
Okay, that's young
Yeah.
to get pregnant.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that must have been, that was a game changer for you because it really changed your life.
For sure. Yeah. And it was also, I was just so angry, I think, more than anything at that point, because nobody had told me about the power of my body, about boundaries or limits, And this is not an uncommon narrative, and even particularly today when abortion has been almost outlawed in many states in the U.S. So it's something it's really going backwards, not forwards. And it did start my trajectory in advocacy and lobbying. But it started from a point of wanting to change that for other young women and girls.
It's different here in Europe, right? When about things like abortion and women's rights are, and I will not say they are perfect, but we have more rights here, at least in the Netherlands, than in, I think, the United States or other parts of the world.
For sure, yeah. I mean, the Netherlands is actually one of the places that's seen in the world as a best practice example for, particularly for sexual education in schools. So that starts here in the Netherlands at the age. In most schools, it does depend on where you live, like many things in the country, but it starts from the age of 4. And that's a program that the Rutgers Stichting here in the Netherlands develops and has been developing for the last 60 years. And this happened, this was right after the war. So in the early 50s is when these programs began to be rolled out here. And even if it's a conversation, just starting on this is your body, you own your body, these are your body parts, that's how it starts. It's not teaching them about how to have sex, and this is the myth and the fear that is in countries like the US, where it's kind of don't ask, don't tell, which we all know what that leads to. It leads to high pregnancy rates, higher rates of sexual violence. So yes, I think you're doing it right here. It's not perfect, but it is a lot better.
Yeah, it's definitely not perfect because there is not a lot of equality on the work floor here between men and women. Women earn a lot less than men in the same when you do the same job, right?
Yeah.
Exactly the same job, you have the same education. Then a woman earns, I think it's 1/3 less than the man.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So that's not perfect yet.
No. I mean, that's a big part of that is women working part-time, and that you really see with care work, which is something we'll talk about a little bit later. But yeah, with care work that, you're just not compensated for it, and your career takes a huge hit, and women are the ones that are traditionally doing those caring roles in a family.
Yeah, well, talking about care work, how long have you been here now in Amsterdam?
Last week, it will be 9 years. 9 years.
9 years, okay. You have a son. He's 11 years old. His name is Iggy. And Iggy changed your life. I mean, my daughter also changed my life. And I think everybody's child changes your life in a certain way. But we have something in common. We both have special children in the sense that they need more care and a different approach than regular children. This sounds a little bit strange, but we'll explain it. When Iggy was born, everything seemed fine.
Yes, he was born in Cambridge. We were still living in the UK at that point. besides being a very demanding child, and being born in the caul, he was born in the caul, which is when they come out in the sack, so the waters never break. Um, and it's really extraordinary. It's like 1 in 80,000 births. Um, and there's these myths saying that you're never supposed to drown. There's sailors' myths that if you're born in the caul, you're never meant to drown, and you're like this important person in society. And that really proved to be true as Iggy got older. But yeah, it was uneventful for the first few years of his life. Really, he was delayed on walking and talking, but as a first child goes, I wasn't, and I'm quite laid back. I wasn't really concerned. And then everything did change when we moved here. So at the age of 4.5, he was diagnosed with a very rare neurological disease called TRP12.
Can you explain why you had him diagnosed in the first place? Why did you go to see a doctor?
Well, as he got older, the delays the gaps were getting bigger and bigger. So he wasn't speaking was the main thing that we were noticing at a young age. So he didn't really start speaking until 3, and then it was just a word here, a word there. And really struggling with the language, lots of like drooling, and there were signs, other signs. So yeah, I think it was more other people, professionals, teachers, psychologists saying, you need to go here, look further, something's wrong, something's wrong. And until the very end, until we had the diagnosis, and that was a 1.5-year process. And finally, we got a complete genome sequencing done. Up until that point, I really believed that there was nothing wrong, and now, looking back, my instincts were really right. Yes, he has a neurological disease. That's the label that we call something of somebody that's different, like so many people, but there was really nothing wrong, and thankfully he's healthy. So unlike a lot of parents with rare diseases, they have a lot of physical ailments. He's healthy.
I like the way that you look at his condition and who he is, because I looked at your GoFundMe page, and on it says that Iggy is not what did you say? Oh yeah, that you don't Iggy's condition is not a sad one, but instead you celebrate it because it makes him very special.
Yeah,
and I relate to that. I think it's also good because for Iggy it's the best reaction that you can have as a parent.
yeah. I mean, it's for him. Yeah, it's for him. Really, like, I mean, every child, every person deserves to be celebrated. Not deserves. Every person should be celebrated. And in many circumstances, when you have like your own daughters and like mine, when you have a diagnosis of difference, that's not the case, and it becomes really hard to celebrate them because of everything that everybody is telling you about what's wrong, and the focus on them kind of failing,
Yeah, because they focus on what's wrong.
Right.
And not on who Iggy really is, because he is not his diagnosis. He has a diagnosis.
Right.
Yeah. What happened when they told you that he has this extremely rare disease? How did that feel for you?
Terrible, really scary, darkest, most unimaginable period of my life. Yeah, it was unbelievable. He was the 21st known case in the world. And I remember when the doctor called me, I was in a Dutch class, and she just called me on the phone. And this was after like test results had been lost. It was waiting 1.5 years for something to come through, something to tell us something about some of the symptoms that he was having or why he wasn't developing properly. She calls me on the phone, says we have the results. It's very rare disease. I've never come across it in my 35 years as an epidemiologist. I can tell there's 20 other cases in the world. His life will tell us more about this condition than I could ever. Let's talk on Monday. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, and that was it. And that was really it. Then she hung up.
That was a cold shower.
Yeah. Yeah, my partner was out of town at the time, and that was the beginning of certainly up until this point in my life, and I'm still young, but that was some of the darkest days and months and really a couple years of my life. And it wasn't because of really now looking back, because that situation was so unbelievably terrible. I mean, it was. I mean, but look at the world. Look at things happening in the world. Like, it wasn't because I couldn't have handled it. It was because there was a complete lack of support. There was a complete lack of emotional intelligence around being a parent and raising a child, and all the things that go along with that aren't just about a diagnosis or aren't just about what you can and can't do in society. And that was the hard part, the isolation, the loneliness. Yeah.
Yeah, I relate to that because I went through the same thing. Yeah, yeah. But she didn't tell you the name of the disease, right?
She told me, yeah, she did. She said it's called TRP12, and then it causes, and then it was a list speech and language, severe speech and language delays, cognitive inability, and lack of development, epilepsy, heart failure, mobility issues, autism, ADHD.
Wow.
Yeah.
And she left you like that.
Yeah. And that was
after
it.
having said this.
Yeah. So that's
Wow.
also the kind of professionals that we talked about this, the professionals in the healthcare industry, that's a very typical behavior for them because they're taught on how to do all the science, but they really don't know shit about how to connect with a mother or a parent or a carer or a human being around what the implications of that science or what you're saying means to that person, right? Like, I find that gap just so staggering, and not just in this country, in every country.
Yeah, it's terrible because it's traumatic when you get a message like that and they show no empathy at all. They don't treat you as a mother and they don't treat your child as a human being. It's just, scientific diagnosis. And this is what it is. This is what it causes. We'll talk on Monday. Have a nice weekend.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah, well, luckily you are strong and I am too, but there are parents who cannot deal with this.
No, and I think that's and our story is not unique. Your story is not unique in that way, and that this is the way that information is delivered to parents, and then it's just like, oh well, we did our job, we diagnosed him. Now we know what it is, so then that's done. But that's where it begins. That's where our journey began, was that diagnosis. It wasn't where it ended. Then it was just question after question and black hole of whatever this was that we then had to accept and navigate through healthcare systems and education, and in a country where we barely spoke the language. And so
how did you do that? How did you navigate through all of this?
Well, it was a very long journey of talking to people and perseverance. I think it helps, obviously, that I have a background as an advocate and a lobbyist, and was committed to fight like hell for my kid. And a lot of people, don't have that energy or those resources or that background, My partner is also a lawyer. So I think from the very beginning, after the initial shock and sadness, we were really looking at it from like a rights-based perspective and like, what are our rights here? What is his rights? But it really started like before that, like that's practical stuff. It really started during COVID. And like everybody else in the world, we were trapped in our homes and just dealing with this diagnosis. And we had time to build this amazing community. And we made friends with our neighbors and these people on our street. And Iggy, our son, he was the one that actually began to make friends so he was 4.5 at that point, with neighbors and friends, and people knew. I would meet people on the street and they were like, "Hey, Iggy." I didn't know them, but saw them with our babysitter or outside of our house or something. He has that real ability to make an impact and connect with people. And it was through that community that I really started to be vulnerable about our story and started to open up about how difficult it was and how alone we were and how hard it was. And that's really what got us through. Those people that were around during that time.
What kind of does he need any special treatment, or did you have to reorganize your life around him, or how does your day-to-day life, what does it look like with a special kid with TRIP12?
Yeah, well, at that point, I was working full time, doing the sexual rights and health stuff, and my partner was working as well. We were both traveling, and as he got older, yeah, the severity of his needs became a lot clearer. So he yeah, I mean, he wasn't potty trained. He's still not potty trained. He's 11. He still pees the bed at night, and pooping and peeing is still like it's going better, but then you get up one step forward, two steps back kind of situation. Yeah, I mean everything, he needs help with everything. I mean, he if you met him on the street, you'd be like, oh, he looks like a normal child, but disability is oftentimes invisible. And his yeah, he needs help to eat, he needs help to put his clothes on, he needs help to go outside, all the things. And as he's getting older, it's like it's getting harder, it's not getting easier. He is progressing, but the way that you would track progress is very different, and we've had to reframe what that looks like. He has very severe ADHD. That's probably the most striking characteristic out of the way this disease is displaying within him, which means that he can't focus on anything ever, really. So and to do small tasks like put your clothes on or feed yourself or use the toilet, you have to be able to focus a little bit. And so he really struggles with his attention span, speaking, all of it. So I had to leave my job. I chose to leave my job and start this foundation that I've started called A Different Story.
Because there is no help for him, or why did you really stop working to take care of Iggy, or to start a foundation?
It was both. I mean, it was initially, I started because I needed to care for him. He was in school at this point, so it was like after school in the mornings, but then we would be up all night. One of us would be up all night with him, and then it was the mornings, and then it was the afternoons. And, that's a full-time job for somebody. We went through 4 or 5 different nannies in the span of like a 6-month period, I think. Where we just could not find qualified help, people that really could handle him. And I didn't need a babysitter. I needed a qualified care that had specialty with kids with disabilities. And I couldn't find that. This is before we had any kind of support from the government or funding. And then during that time when he was at school, then I started this foundation. because I wanted to give back and because I wanted to be part of a community that was contributing to something positive that was helping his life rather than um, just be sad about it, you know? um, and that's how it started.
Yeah, well, that's beautiful. And that's also I think, your resilience. You are able to turn something traumatic into something beautiful, successful. And you're helping others with it now as well.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. That means a lot to me. I do feel that. I do feel very empowered by where I'm at right now. It certainly wasn't always the case. And I think it was really, this toxic narrative that society tells us, tells women, tells mothers, tells families, that a family, that a child, that happiness, that success, that all of these things, they look a certain way. They look a certain way. And none of that has proven to be true in my situation. None of the things that society told me I needed to be happy, or the kind of child I needed to have, or the kind of family, or the kind of career, none of that has proven to be true. And I think, like, in the process of like living it and debunking that myth has really been one of the most empowering experiences of my life, because I'm in charge of what my story is, not somebody else, and yeah, that does take strength to not listen to everybody else's perspective, his speculation. um I read a quote the other day that really resonated with me, and it said, "Oh, and I put it on my Instagram. In a highly speculating world, perspective is everything. Um, everybody is going to find something. Anyone could find something that you're not doing right, or that looks wrong, or that looks different. But it's about my perspective that matters."
That's true. I agree. I think the same way. It's always perspective, always. And it doesn't matter what other people think or say or do. Your own perspective, that's how you create your own reality, right?
Yeah.
And also, we talked about this before, it's also acceptation, accepting the circumstances, or whatever happens to you. You never thought this would happen to you, right? When you had your son, you would never imagine that your life with your child would look like this, that you would do the things that you're doing now, that he is a very special child, it's that he has taught you so much.
No, nobody would have. I would have never imagined that. I think I was ready for a lot, but not this. Nope. I mean, that's the way life is, right? You're thrown things you can't guess or imagine. It'll always be different than what you thought. The things that you think you fear that you'll be fighting against, or your hardships of life. I think as I get older, I find that none of those are ever true. It won't be that. If you think it's that, it definitely won't be that. It'll be something else. It'll challenge you in this totally new way that you never anticipated being challenged, and I think that is really an important part of the empowerment, and that's so why I love your podcast theme so much, because it's not, my story is not unique, your story is not unique. It is unique in the way that it's our individual story, but everybody has a story to tell. And that's why I started a different story, because it started with our story, but it's about how we reframe and tell other people's stories too, or enable them to tell other people's stories. um, so much about our society, I feel like, is riddled in shame and isolation about what your story is, um, to be raw or real about what you're experiencing or the pain that you're going through is somehow it's shameful. It's seen as like you're failed, or people don't want to be that vulnerable. But I think that is where, for me, that is where it began. That was where things started to make sense. To be advocating on such a personal issue is hard, very different from advocating for a cause or an organization that's over there. This is my life. This is my street. This is my community, and I've had to get real raw and dirty and real with that to connect with other people.
Yeah, it's outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me as well. Sorry, I relate. I recognize this. Can you share with me how much it has changed you already?
I think, I was thinking about this question before the call today. Because when you go through these big changes, you don't really, they're small things each day, right? I think for me, it's just been about acceptance and that perspective, something that you thought would be unimaginably difficult and dark and the most terrible thing that could ever happen to you turns out to be the best thing, because that experience taught me to let go. That experience taught me to stop holding on or controlling something that I needed to control, and just accept that this is my kid. This is who was given to me, and he's amazing and beautiful, and I choose about the story that I have with him, and that is what I have control over. I have control over telling my story, of experiencing my life in a certain way, of choosing to celebrate him rather than struggle. And it is a struggle many days, big struggles, big tears, it's not to say that it's always easy, but if you accept and you have gratitude for what is given to you, then for me that has changed everything, because I don't need to control it. I don't need to control him. I don't need to make him better. I don't need to find a cure. And that has been very empowering and mind-opening,
Yeah, that's a hard lesson though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think, when you go through stuff like this, that's the first thing you learn, that you cannot control anything but your own reaction to the circumstances that you are in. That's the only control you have.
Yeah.
And it's really helps to understand it and accept it, because otherwise you will become so frustrated and angry and tired if you're trying to control everything that's outside of you, which you can't, never.
No, and it's also like it's the same with so many parents. You think it's like a false sense of control that we have over our children. Like, oh, if they're healthy and they're smart and I got a good job and I have a nice partner, then things are okay. Like they feel like you're doing good. You got control over it. You don't have a sick kid, or, you don't have a abusive relationship or whatever it is. You think you have control over it, but that is just not true. I think as a human being, but particularly when we talk about being a parent, you have control over nothing. Tomorrow, everything can change. Your kid can get cancer. They can get hit by a bus. They can, like, anything can happen. And I think most parents that haven't gone through something like this live in a state of like needing to control that, because that's what they got to hold on to. But it's just not true. So I think part of how I've been changed is because I let go of that. I don't think about the future very much. I think about how we're getting through today and what's happening next week and maybe next year. But beyond that, I don't know. Will he ever read and write? Probably not. Will he ever live alone? I don't know. Will he ever have a partner? No idea. Will he ever have sex or children? Probably. I don't know. But I don't think that those things, they don't matter anymore, because that's in the future. This is now. This is all I have, and I'm going to make the most of it.
For me, what you're saying, for me, it resonates with that you chose to live out of love instead of out of fear, because control is living out of fear.
Yeah.
And worry is fear. And you're worrying about things that you don't have control over. So it's that loop. When you're in there, you get stuck. But when you accept the circumstances and understand I don't have control over all these things that I am afraid of, I'm just going to live out of, trust and love, and I'm going to focus on today and make the best of it.
Exactly.
Right?
That's all we have.
Yeah, exactly. We only have now, and that's all there is, and there's nothing else. And you started your foundation, A Different Story. Not every parent starts a foundation. I did as well. So we're the exceptions. But you are really, very active in the foundation, and you have a mission. Can you tell me about it?
Yes. It started as just as what we were saying. It started as the mission was to raise awareness and celebrate difference in children and in people and society. And it started as, a simple act of community fundraising that was focused on raising money and awareness around children living with disabilities and long-term diseases in other countries. And it started as a way to meet my neighbors and build community and give back and focus on like how much we do have to give. We live in a very rich country and are privileged, and most of us have money and houses. And I find that talking about people that are much less off really helps me to not only come to terms with what I'm dealing with, but also broaden people's perspectives of really the realities that are happening around the world. And that's how it started. So we started campaigning on the importance of difference and people that are different in society. I think as a parent, it's very hard to celebrate your child when they're different. And I'm sure that you can relate to this. But their success and their abilities and everything, is a direct kind of reflection on you as a parent. And it started with our own story and celebrating Iggy and not celebrating him in spite of his disease, but because of it. And people will be like, well, what? Like, surely if you could change it, you would change it. And for me, I wouldn't, and I think his extraordinariness, his light, everything that he is very much a part of his genetic disease, not in spite of it. For whatever reason that he came here, it is a gift, and it causes us hardships because we have a life and boxes and society and things that he fits outside of. But he's happy. He's good. It's about how we need to change. And I think with so many people that are different in society, struggling to fit into these boxes, struggling to be accepted and to be seen is like our problem, not theirs. And that was the sort of the messaging and the premise around A Different Story. And now when that was what we've been doing for the last 2 years, but just next month we're getting our first official funding from a biotechnology company, which is very exciting. And we're shifting focus now. We're shifting focus to be in the Netherlands, and to help other families with children with disabilities navigate the system. So from healthcare to education to community services to social benefits, we found through our experience that there's a huge gap in the Netherlands for helping families like ours. And people might be shocked. They're like, oh, think about this charity or this charity. And there are lots of amazing charities doing very good things, but none of them were really focused on like how we support all families with children with disabilities in a broader sense, rather than like what's the diagnosis. And everything comes from this medical place of, well, okay, we just need the diagnosis so you can get the benefits, so you can get all the things that you need. But like I said, the diagnosis is the very beginning of the journey. That's where the support begins. And some parents never get a diagnosis. So then where do they go? But I think that there's a real commonality in what these families need. And that's support. And that's to be seen. That's to be heard. And that's what we're trying to do with the Different Story is fill that gap and be a place of well-being and comfort for people.
I think that's really, it's very necessary, first of all. And it's wonderful that you're doing this, because that's what I was lacking as well, because I had to figure it out all by myself. And we didn't have a diagnosis for about 12 years. So if you don't have a diagnosis in the Netherlands, you don't get help, you don't get medical care, you don't get support. Nothing is paid for because there's no diagnosis. That's how the system works. And I absolutely agree that the system that we have had for, I don't know how many years now, it's all one box, it's all boxes. Yeah, and you need a diagnosis to fit in one box, and you need something else to fit in another box. But if you don't have a diagnosis, or you don't fit into one of the boxes, then you're not there. So there's no help, there's nothing. You don't exist, which is like crazy, because we're people, we're all unique, we're all different, we're all humans, but we're all different, and we have different needs. And we're all special in our own way. And I myself, I don't like to be put in a box. And I think that the whole system needs to be rearranged. There needs to come a different type of system where we can all be celebrated and where we can all live our best lives. Because the way it is right now, it's not working anymore.
No, if you have a diagnosis and you're set up with, if you have autism, I mean, autism is like a great example because it's so broad, but say, and Down syndrome can be broad too, but you have a diagnosis and you fit in with those people that have that. And then they're like, okay, this is what you're allowed for this, or this are the opportunities for this. But if you have a very rare disease, an ultra rare disease like my son's, or you have a condition like your daughter's that nobody knows, there's so many families navigating that space. Or you have a diagnosis and you're just still feeling isolated and lonely. I think that together we all have similar struggles. We have a similar need to feel connected, to be part of a community, to understand what your basic rights are in this country of caring for a child with severe and complex disabilities, whatever those disabilities are. And I think the Netherlands is not great about that, which is like, and maybe that's, as an American, Americans are very like, I like this part and like, don't like this part. It's like very much advocating for themselves. And it comes from a rights-based perspective of, this is what you're allowed, this is what you can do, this is what you're entitled to. We're here, it's just kind of like, well, whatever they'll give me or whatever's there, and I think that we need to start advocating for families and for people that have special needs in a different way that comes from a place of like, look, this is not only what you deserve, but this is your right. And that there's a lot of commonality. It doesn't matter what our condition is, the condition of our child is. There's a lot of commonality and well-being and support that's needed in society here.
Yeah, exactly, because it has the same result for all of us. If you have a child with special needs, let's use that word, it has the same result. you enter the same type of world. You're pushed out of the normal life, but you want to be part of life. You want to feel included in the normal daily things that everybody else is doing.
Right.
You don't want to be an outcast, because actually you are not an outcast because you have a condition. You're just a little different. But if you're different, you're being pushed outside of society. And that's the problem, I think.
Yeah, and that's happening in the education system. That happens in the healthcare system. That happens in psychiatric services. Like all of those, like go into the box that you fit in one of those services and one of those areas, and they'll help you. And then that just creates further isolation and separation. My son has been to 5 different schools since he started school at 4. Every one of them wrong. Every one of them we were pushed in that direction by some teacher that thought, oh, well, maybe this will be good, because nobody knew. We knew. We should have known. Somebody should have told us that actually you know best. So you make that decision, and the law here supports you to do that. Nobody ever told us that until we got an education lawyer, and he told us that. And now we were in a great school, but we had to take out a lawsuit against the Board of Education to get to that place, because there's a huge shortage of places for kids with special needs. But because, it's like they're not used to families saying no, but that's not the law. Like we can choose any school we want. My child's not staying at home and being looked after by a care worker, because everybody has a right to an education. I don't care what your needs are. I don't care what your ability to learn is. You have a right to an education. You have a right to be in a group of people. You have a right to be seen and progressing on your journey, whatever that trajectory is. And that is one of the things that we want to help other families with here, through an education lawyer and through a rights-based perspective.
Awesome. It feels like your activism and your resilience is only being triggered by all of this. Am I right?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, it's been really a nice circle to be able to come back to a place that feels very comfortable to me, and has always been a deep-seated passion, which is advocating for other people that don't have a voice, and now being in a place emotionally that I can do that for my son, but also for other people, feels absolutely fantastic. Yes, thank you.
If something happens, like if something goes wrong or something happens with Iggy, what is your first reaction? What do you do?
It depends on the day. Sometimes I'm gripped by fear, like every other parent, and have dark days. But other time, now, I go to friends. I have a support network. I run a parent support group for parents of kids with special needs. I feel like I can just be vulnerable with people in my circle and cry and let it be bad, and then know that it changes, know that it doesn't stay bad, and that you got to just go through those motions, which is a roller coaster, like life, not take it too seriously.
What would you advise a parent who's watching right now and they are struggling? What would you advise them to do?
I would say, I certainly don't have all the answers, but I would just circle back to how I started, which is trying to have like the foresight to let go of this toxic narrative that is told, I think, to so many families about what a family looks like, what a child looks like, what success looks like, about your ability as a parent being directly reflected from your child's abilities, letting go of that you don't have to hold that it can look really different, and it can be a lot brighter and happier when we start defining what our story is. And that's what I would say, that it can look so different. It can be a different story, and you're in control of that.
Yeah, and different doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad or worse. It can be equally beautiful or maybe even better than what you have imagined it to be.
Right, right. I mean, thank God we're not all the same, you know. Thank God we have beautiful and different people that brighten up our world, you know.
Exactly. Yeah, it makes it so much more beautiful with all those different people.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I've been looking at your tattoo all the time. It's so beautiful. Can you tell me about it?
Yeah, this is Princess Leia, um, done in the Virgin de Guadalupe form. All of these tattoos are actually done in the last couple of years, which I would say is relevant to this podcast because it was really about how I turned my trauma into a strength. And that was through personal expression and art form. These are all feminist tattoos that represent something or somebody female that has brought me strength. Um, so, yeah, that is quite relevant.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's really nice. Maybe I should get a tattoo also.
There you go.
I don't have any, so I'm just pure and natural still. So maybe I should do something too. I really like it. Looks good on
Well,
you.
I can recommend some artists if you go down that road.
Thank you. I will ask you when I'm ready to go.
I mean, life is short, you know, you'll probably be gone before you actually regret it, or at least that was my approach.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. That's true. If people would like to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
Our website is www.adifferentstory.nl. You can contact me through that, or I'm also on Instagram at adifferentstorynl. Yeah, those are probably the two best places. Be very happy to speak to anybody.
Great. And what is your mission for the future?
We want to change the lives and the quality of life of children living with disabilities and their families in the Netherlands. And that's as simple as that. Quality of life, meaning how they access services, benefits, support, how they find their own voice. That's our mission.
That's a big mission.
Yeah.
So you will be here for the next 50 years or
Oh
so.
yeah. Oh yeah. I'm set. This is my home. I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, you're not going anywhere?
No, we're very much settled here. Yeah, this is Iggy's home.
That's good. That's good. Is there anything else you would like to share with me?
Just a big thank you for having me on your show and for allowing me to uh, share my story. I think it's absolutely wonderful what you're doing, and your own story really touched me as well. So this is pretty extraordinary and fantastic for women to be giving back to other women, and how the circle of empowerment builds when we share our stories and when we share what we know to be true with ourselves, and you're obviously doing that, so just to thank you.
Well, thank you for the beautiful compliment, and it's been my pleasure. I think you're doing a wonderful job. It's very important what you're doing, so I really hope that you're going to continue doing this. And Iggy is in the best of hands with you, and I'm sure his father is the same as you. So I'm happy for Iggy that he has two wonderful parents that celebrate his difference. And, you're setting a big, huge example for a lot of people. So thank you.
Thank you. Same for Ruby, your daughter. Thank you very much. That means a lot to me.